this computer. All right, so welcome everybody. It's great to have you with us today for our, what are we in? April webinar, Building Stakeholder Relationships in the World of AI. Today I have a really, really special guest with me, Tani Clark. Tani and I got talking at a conference recently and we hit it off. We just met that day, I think it was. Yep. And we were just, you know, talking nonstop, and we were talking about amazing things to do with AI and building relationships and lawyers. And I thought, oh, this is such a cool conversation. We really should invite other people in so that they can listen in and contribute. And so that kind of what was the catalyst for today's topic and today's conversation. So we've got some more people joining us as we go, which is lovely to see. So welcome everybody. I know it's the last day of April. It is the last day of April, isn't it? Yes, last day of April, first week of school holidays for those of you in New South Wales. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling quite relieved that I get the house to myself again, except for the dog and the bird and the cat and everything else. And we can get on with business again. So today we're talking about building stakeholder relationships in the age of AI. I don't know about you, but the topic of AI can sometimes get me in a little bit of a spin. And I know a lot of people who feel a little overwhelmed by the idea, by the topic, by the thought of having AI taking over some of our jobs. These robots that will come in and kick us out of our offices. But, and some of us are quite excited by it. You know, I talk to people who are like, love AI. We love all this technology. It's making our life so much easier. So whichever camp you sit in, I think there's going to be quite a lot of value for you in today's session, because Tani and I, mostly Tani, will be talking about how do we as lawyers almost preserve our, I don't know if integrity is the right word, but, you know, preserve our effectiveness as lawyers as AI starts to do more and more of the day-to-day tasks of what we do. And specifically, how do we continue to build trust with our clients and other stakeholders? How do we continue to use empathy and listening? And what happens in the brain when all that is happening that really technology can't, duplicate or do? And so as human beings, our human skills are becoming more and more important, I think, as AI starts to become a bit more prevalent in our industries. A little bit about me, and then I'm going to hand over to Tani to introduce herself. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lara Wentworth, as it says on the can, and I was a lawyer for a long time. I might just share it. Since we've got slides, why don't we do that? We share some slides. Can you see that, Tani?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. All right. Okay. Come on, let's go, brain. You can do this. Oh, that's not me. See, we do this as we go. There's nothing rehearsed here. So I'm director and co-founder of Coaching Advocates, which is a coaching firm that specialises in training and coaching of members of the legal profession. And we're worldwide, so we've got coaches all over the world. Myself, I was a lawyer for a long time, and I became a coach, I don't know, sometime 2018, something like that. I became a coach, and I now coach and train lawyers. My specialty is in neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP for short, which is really about how the language of the mind sets those programs that set our everyday lives or control our everyday lives, and how we can rewrite those programs so that we can have better results and outcomes. So I absolutely, I love what I do. I'm going to hand over to you, Tani, to introduce yourself, because I'm super excited about having you with us today. And then we'll just tell people a little bit about how today will go, and then we'll get started with our conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lara. As you mentioned, yeah, it was really wonderful to meet you the other day, and I think ever since then the dialogue has just been so rich and exciting. So it's really wonderful to be featured in this webinar with you, and to have this time to collaborate and discuss something really meaningful. So, and very much on topic. I think everyone's talking about AI at the moment. So my name is Tani Clark. I'm the founder and CEO of Alfie Health, which is a mental health and wellbeing organisation. I'm a registered psychologist, been practicing for well over 15 years now. And my specialty has really been in high performance and critical incidents response. So, for instance, I was the first responder to the Sydney siege, and also supported special operations, ambulance, police through the inquest. I was the first responder to the tragic passing of Philip Hughes, the cricketer. Was out on site with the cricket team. It was actually exactly a month of being on site with them, 13 hours a day for an entire month.
Wow.
On that anniversary, one of the cricket players came in and said to me, Tony, I don't think you'll be going home tonight. And that's when I got a call at 2:30 in the morning for the Lint Sydney siege.
Wow.
Also responded to the Nepal earthquakes, supporting getting people cleaned up and helping them process a really awful incident. And more recently around the Gaza war and the Bondi incident. So my area of expertise is in critical incident response and organisational psychology, and it's pretty end to end. It's around, the communication, the confidentiality, the empathy, the trust, managing people from a psychological safety standpoint, but also the organisation's reputation that's been impacted from a media perspective, and kind of the long term of whether there's coroner court investigations and things like that that go forward through that. And so I guess a major part of that is around leadership as well. So I do a lot of workshops on leadership and the difference between management and good leadership, and really high performance. Like how do we build self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and really define ourselves as individuals for good resilience and risk mitigation and self-management. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. Awesome. It's super exciting to have you with us today, Tani, and I'm excited about collaborations that we might be, I think, delving into, you and I, because we're kind of on the same wavelength in terms of things, but come at it from different perspectives, perhaps, in different training. So really, really excited to have you. Might stop sharing, so and then we'll share again. We never stop sharing, but just stop sharing our screen. So in terms of today, you're more than welcome to ask us questions as we go. This will be more of a fireside chat or conversation. It's kind of how we prefer to do things rather than presentation style. We do have some slides, which we will, put up from time to time. The slide pack, the entire slide pack will be available for you afterwards, so I can send it out to you so you can have that with you. But for today, it's going to be used sparingly as Tani and I have a conversation. And so without further ado, I'm just bringing up my notes because, of course, my computer likes to do funny things. And so, like I said, today we really are talking about AI and how that influences our ability to build solid stakeholder engagements and relationships. So I guess, Tani, to get us started, I'd love to ask you, from your experience and your professional training and background, how do you see AI's influence on client stakeholder relationship in general?
Yeah, I think I guess to the point, even when you're in your introduction, that you were saying it is quite interesting that we're really in this kind of still state of unknown for a lot of people. And so it can, people are on a kind of broad spectrum. Some people are feeling kind of really scary and intimidated and vulnerable by the idea of it. And rightly so, actually, and I guess I'll get into that. And some people are really embracing it and really utilizing it to its best advantage, and it's really enhancing their skill set and their capability. So I think where we're sitting right now, because it is still relatively new for most people, it's pretty broad. AI can, when used correctly, can have a phenomenal impact on your workplace. And if we were to kind of just simplify that a little bit, really, it's just a faster kind of Excel spreadsheet. If you have, put in a whole lot of data set information there that is actually accurate, and then you're kind of running your old Excel, like, can you see patterns? Can you see insights? Like what can we, when we slice and dice this data in different ways, what can we see? It's just like your good old Excel spreadsheet, but far more powerful if you're using it correctly. But on the other hand, where some of the intimidation can be is that kind of fear of the unknown, of like, have we got the right data points in there? And if we don't have the right data points in there and we don't appreciate the limitations of AI, it can actually be pretty ghastly, because assumptions make an ass out of you and me. As we know, if we don't take the time to listen and make sure we've got the correct data points, and it will take the human to understand that, because we're the one that feeds the machine essentially, then we can kind of cut ourselves short. So I guess in short, if used correctly, it can help with huge predictive analytics, that your data set could be global. So not only are you understanding things that are going on in your individual world, but maybe what's going on across an entire population of risk of litigation, or what's the most likely avenue for success, or there's some pretty powerful predictive analytics. It helps you with efficiency and automation. At the end of the day, as a lawyer, when you you need to make sure that you show up prepared. And so really AI is just another resource, another tool in your tool bag. You might do a Google search, you might talk to a colleague about their experience with a particular case that's similar. You might read a good old encyclopedia or some law books, but AI is just another tool that you can use to really increase your efficiency. It's pretty good with the data-driven insights. And I guess with data-driven insights, what can be great, in line with what you were talking about with NLP, it's kind of the language. It can help a lawyer articulate themselves better, because if that information is provided to you and presented to you in a clear way, because you've been able to use layman term language to ask a question, then you're going to get a layman term response as well. So it can actually help you with your communication of how you articulate some of those insights. It's 24/7. It's available anytime. So, a lawyer might, sometimes in the hustle and bustle, you might take on too many cases and you might have to look at information at 2:30 in the morning. And so, you might not have a trusted colleague, but you could still have a trusted AI system if it's got accurate data to gain that really quickly. It improves your decision-making capability if you're asking the right questions, and it can, as mentioned, it can enhance your productivity. So it's pretty powerful if used correctly.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you if used correctly. And I think that's kind of that transition point that we're in. Some of us are learning how to use it properly and other people are just resisting it. From, when I was a lawyer, but when I was a lawyer, obviously we didn't have AI, but I remember lots of stress because of the amount of work that I needed to do just to get to understand my client's case, whether it be disclosure documents or whether it be just kind of mountains of things that I had to go through, find out what are the themes, what's missing, what's not. And that sort of work for me personally was extremely daunting and overwhelming. And that used to take away from my ability to actually connect with the client and understand them a little bit better, because I was so overwhelmed by the amount of data that I had to process. So I think if used correctly, especially, in the world of data, all this information that we've got to process, if we can give it that task to do, it may be able to free us to do more of the connection, to do more of the trust building, to do more of the listening, to do more of that relationship building. So absolutely agree with you. It's whether or not we're using it properly, and it's our mindset about it as well. I think that makes a huge difference as to how we use it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's inevitable. It's going to be here, and clients are actually going to expect it of you over time. I guess, once upon a time there was faxes and we'd spend a lot of time sending faxes. Now, you can bill less because it's an email. There will be an evolution. There'll be a lag of time, but there will get to a point where clients are actually quite educated and they'll be expecting to use it to increase the efficiency, and really where you stay competitive. And the difference between being, I guess, a lawyer or an exceptional lawyer is going to be in that EQ, that empathy, that listening, that really deep connection. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So what are some effective strategies for us lawyers to identify and address the diverse needs and expectations of stakeholders in this AI enhanced environment?
I think this is I love this question, because this is really where you get to the heart of it. AI really is only limited to the information you put in it. And so it can have, national or global statistics, and that can really help you as a baseline. But really then it's going to take the individual emotional intelligence and the intellect of that lawyer to then understand the nuances of that individual's case. And not only kind of their case around who did what and who said what, but also what does that client want? What does success look like for them? So, because it's no one size fits all. And that's going to require you to have really good listening, really good communication skills to get that person's mindset into a place where they can even check in with themselves and figure out what they want, to be able to articulate it. That in itself is a special skill. And so there's cultural sensitivities as well as contextual kind of issues. There's really rich problem solving. You're going to have to strategize with that client and create basically some vision around what is it going to look like, what is it going to look like when you walk into that court case, or what does plan A look like versus plan B, to kind of strategize and give them that sense so that they feel held, that they feel heard and seen and valued, and they understand what is a likely outcome. I guess it's kind of almost like a good, doctor bedside manner. Just because you know it as a lawyer, really what's going to kind of build that success, that stickiness, and the outcome is you being able to make that client feel that they also understand the probability, the risk, the likelihood, the outcomes. And that takes that individual nuance of really sitting down and talking to them that AI can't replace.
It's really interesting because one of the I suppose one of the things that come up quite a bit when I do any talks around or workshops around communication, somebody almost always will ask the question, how do we do active listening? How do we actually understand what the client needs when we're doing it either, virtually, or there's a portal that they tap into and they fill in their forms and we've got very minimal contact with people. How do we work out what their communication style is, or what sort of, person they are, and that sort of thing, when we've got almost like a barrier between us and the client that is now AI, that it does some of that work, and we're sort of sitting back and waiting for the results to pop out on the other end or whatever. So how do you see that working? What do we do now that we've got something in between almost us and the client, that collects data, that gathers information, that does a little bit of the discovery work or whatever it might be? How do we then become, I suppose, how do we still connect in that space? If that makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, this kind of conversational competence is a single skill that is so overlooked. We really overly rely on, and can sometimes almost get a little bit lazy, I dare say, from forms and written information and notes. It really, where the magic happens is in that deep conversation. That's where you're really going to find that exceptional differentiating point. And the form, it's the same thing in psychology. I can get someone to fill out a DASS, a depression, anxiety, and stress scale, or a PTSD scale, or really all that should be is a starting point for dialogue, for a richer, deeper conversation. So you use that form. You don't suddenly have this form of information and say, okay, well, now I know it all. It's just the starting point for you to kind of have some form of understanding of what's going on. But there's so many more nuances that you need to get to that are far richer. And so when we kind of look at, I guess, building trust and how to kind of get that out of a person, it might be good to kind of understand a little bit about the brain and how that works, and how you get people into a sweet spot for them to actually even be able to share with you the richness of information that you're going to need to be exceptional, and to be able to join the dots for that client. And when I say not only join the dots for that client, but also help them bring stuff out of their blind spots, because clients might go in there with a kind of preconceived ideas about things. It's your job to educate them around the likelihood of an outcome or of its risks based on you having a well-informed insight. And you're only going to get well-informed insights if that person's brain is primed to be able to share. And the reason I say that is to kind of, it's helpful to even understand how the brain works. So I'm going to go into some big depth brain stuff.
I love this stuff. Let's go.
So first of all, I guess this can be helpful. It's a great tool for every person to have in their tool bag, and particularly a lawyer, because you're going to be engaging with human interaction. Is that if I was to kind of put my hand here to kind of represent a brain, this bottom part here is almost like this bottom part of your brain. This is what we call like your reptilian brain. It's a really primal brain. It's your fight, your flight, your freeze, your faint. The reason we call it a reptilian brain is because it's the oldest part of the brain, kind of like a lizard. Lizards don't care about their young. In fact, if they're hungry, they'll probably eat them. They hatch and they're like, you're on your own, kid. I'm just here to survive. I don't really care about you. I'm purely here to survive. And we need this, particularly when I'm looking in critical incidents. You're not kind of thinking about, where you left your lipstick or where you left your handbag. You just need to survive. So you're in your fight, flight, freeze, or faint. Then if I put my thumb here, the thumb here represents your amygdala, which is your emotional area of your brain. It helps motivate us and guide what we think is wrong or right, or what feels good or doesn't feel good. So kind of a mammalian brain, think about it like a big Labrador, it's good, it's bad, I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm bored, you're home. And so, we need this emotional part. Then these fingers here, if I wrap this around here, this kind of creates what we call your prefrontal cortex. So now you can see it like the shape of a brain. This is here. This is the absolute powerhouse of your brain. This is the newest part of the brain that really makes humans fundamentally different to any other creature on Earth. It's the problem-solving area of your brain, your executive function. What we know is that when we are feeling vulnerable or concerned, which is what, I'd say 99% of your clients are feeling vulnerable and concerned, we actually release a stress hormone inside our brain and all through our body called cortisol. Cortisol is the stress hormone that floods your prefrontal cortex, this powerhouse decision-making, problem-solving part of your brain. So what we do is we pop our top. We don't have access to this decision-making part of our brain when we're feeling under threat. And so if you're kind of a lawyer who's feeling kind of overworked and you're hustling and you've got, you're juggling too many clients at the same time, or you're kind of going in with this really authoritative style for the client. So you've got stress in your brain and then you're activating stress in that client's brain. You both popped your top and you're essentially, it's just like Dumb and Dumber. You aren't able to get to the solution. You're not able to communicate. You're not able to build deep rapport, deep trust, that fundamental thing that's going to make you stand out, sticky, for them to kind of want to talk about you and share that you are the best lawyer they've ever had and, highly recommend you, or even get to a really successful outcome with deep connection. You're not going to be able to achieve that when you're in this cortisol state. What we need to do is be able to release oxytocin. Oxytocin is essentially the same chemical that's released when a woman gives birth. This deep connection, so that you want to love that child, protect it, look after it, see it through the good times and the bad times. You want to release that with your client, because then you bring yourselves both back into a whole brain state. When you're a whole brain state, it's only then that the real magic can happen and we can start to really build that trust and that connection. I guess the next part to that is when you were saying, okay, well, great, I've got ourselves in a whole brain state. I've kind of checked in. I've looked at my physical sensations that are going on in my body before I engage with my client. I've noticed whether I've got this big lump in my throat, or a clenched fist, or or I'm a bit sweaty, or check in with yourself first before you engage a client. Self-regulate yourself, big deep breaths, bring yourself into a whole brain state before you engage a client, and then really engage that conversation, thinking the fact that you could learn something from that client. Every single person you ever engage with is going to know something that you don't know. So listening with potential, is really important. So often we think that we're the expert. We just kind of go in hot. But it's really just sitting and listening for potential, because there's little gems that person is going to share with you if you're present that are going to make you a better lawyer every single time, by just listening with no judgment and really engaging in the conversation. So then to that point, I guess you've got to build trust. I'd say the three key areas of trust is around being authentic, do what you say and say what you do, have that kind of level of integrity, have logic. So being able to not only logically be educated about the law and what information you need to present, but also logically communicate that so it's not ambiguous or confusing for the client. And then lastly, to have empathy. You need these key kind of three cornerstones to actually even build trust with someone. Being authentic, being logical, and having empathy. And often we can fall short in one of those. And so empathy is really that truly understanding what's going on in that other person's world and being able to sit there with that and meet them where they're at. And that's really going to influence the type of communication style that you have. And I guess then when you look at building those really effective communications that you asked about, Brene Brown actually talks about this and has some, pretty incredible insights there. And she has an acronym called BRAVING. I don't know if you've heard of it all before, but it's to that point of, once you've built trust, being authentic. So, being consistent, do what you say and say what you do. Being logical, which is, what we've kind of brought about before. Sorry, my apologies. B for boundaries initially. So determine, what's okay and what's not okay. Having some reliability. So, not having too much on your plate, to being overcommitted, truly like showing up for your client, and truly listening, having that level of accountability. So when things don't go as you plan, because that's what you're going to find with a case with legal, is that it's going to take lots of twists and turns, and sometimes you're not really going to kind of, you can't really predict the future. And it's being able to, articulate that with your client as well, to say, look, we can have a plan and we can stick to that plan, but there takes two to tango, and whatever's going on the other side is really going to have an outcome on this. But if you mess up, you really need to kind of own it as a lawyer as well. And that builds that trust. Making sure that you really explain confidentiality, including any limitations. And this becomes a really big one as a defining point between AI as well and human beings, because people fear their confidentiality and data in forms and in technology. So really take the time to explain confidentiality, including limitations. That integrity piece that I spoke about at the start. My apologies, I did the I before the B.
That's okay.
Having non-judgment, I think, is really big. And this, I think, in my experience, can actually play out quite commonly. That sometimes a lawyer may kind of label someone's personality as a way to kind of manipulate the outcome that they want. So kind of like saying, like, what are you, a Liberal? You've got to make a choice here. Like, do you want plan A or plan B? And that's where that kind of non-judgment and that conversational competence that I was talking about really turning up and listening for potential, because that client may, just because you might have 15 years in the law, in the law industry, and that person doesn't have any, can sometimes have an experience bias where you think just because you've been doing something for so long, you are the expert. But sometimes that person can see something from a perspective that you'd never thought about before and might actually make you better. So really listening with that non-judgment. And I think it's the generosity as well, finally, which Brene Brown talks about, is that, when you probably are going to have some pretty titchy times with your client, and, where you feel frustrated, they're highly emotional, you're highly emotional. And so it's really kind of creating this generosity to calm and self-regulate and to kind of to name that empathy of, I know this is really overwhelming for you. I know this must be really scary for you. How, what do you need right now for us to make you feel more safe, or to make you feel more comfortable? That real generosity and that human connection, it can really go a long way for building a really important client connection and stakeholder relationship.
Yeah, it's super, super duper important. I mean, is there a world where AI can do that? They say, oh, maybe not yet, but eventually AI will be able to build that empathy, connection. You don't need human beings anymore. You could just kind of use generative AI. Is that going to ever happen?
I guess, wasn't there a movie, someone fell in love with Siri, and like Siri was and the language can be very intelligent or emotionally intelligent, that, when you ask something, you can kind of spit out a conversation to say, like, whilst it can be really scary, these are the things that are really important in life. Yes, it can kind of spit out this, but ultimately you have to remember that you are talking to a robot. You are talking, it's fake empathy. It's trained empathy. It's not real empathy, because that thing doesn't have a brain, a soul, a heart. So there is an element that you can have more, dare I say, emotionally intelligent output, but it's not true human connection, and it's not going to be as rich as what a human can give you, because it can't add new nuances. It can only join dots between the things it's already got inside it.
And it can't really build rapport. If I know a little bit about the brain, I know about the mirror neurons, and I know that they need to be firing off when we are in connection with somebody else. That then helps us feel safe and feel familiar, and then lets us open up and communicate. So I don't know if, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but from a neuroscience perspective, I don't know if mirror neurons can fire off when we're talking to AI.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there could be an element with time where there's robotics where we could read, a robot could be taught to learn, read body language and to kind of make assumptions and then ask questions about that assumptions. But, that's a long way off of what we're talking about in kind of using AI in, kind of the legal world right now. For now, it's kind of more so around that AI is going to give you kind of more data and facts, and it might be able to provide it in a culturally sensitive or in an emotionally sensitive way. But really the richness, again, kind of seeing it as like it's a form. The form is just the start of the dialogue, the information and the data that's in that AI. Where the human, really, the connection comes into is even physically how you lean into that person, you look them in the eyes, you pay full attention, you get that kind of like micro nuances in that moment that maybe sometimes even that client might not be aware of. And that's where it's about, bringing self-awareness from that client's blind spots into their present moment, to say, like, you look a little bit nervous. Are you feeling nervous? Or, you know, a lot of clients in this scenario feel like this, and you know, that can be really understandable. These are sometimes the things that we can do to make you feel more comfortable, or what do you need right now. It's sitting with that person and being very responsive to, as you said, what your mirror neurons and your empathy is telling you about what that client might need, and capturing that to build that really deep, rich connection in that time. And I guess that really deep, rich connection is that when they're in that full brain state, what we do is when we're in a trust state because we feel calm, what we know about humans is that when they are in this deep connection of oxytocin, they feel heard, seen, and valued, they're more likely to give you more information, which means that when you get more information, you are more informed as a lawyer. So instead of having to kind of make assumptions based on just a little bit of information from a form, you are actually getting some of the really deeper information, maybe about the long-term history of that client with the person they're up against, maybe some of the behavior that the person that they're up against has done before. So it helps you kind of predict, you know, how they're most likely going to negotiate or react or respond to things. You know, it's going to give you far richer information and what you'll find is in the flexibility of that, when your client's in this whole brain state, they are not only more likely to reveal more, but they're much more likely to then kind of feel safe that if there is mistakes made and this relationship is kind of has moments of imperfection, which is going to happen because emotions are high and you can't predict the complete outcome of the case. They're going to have more flexibility in that. They're going to have, because they've built trust with you, they kind of expect that those mistakes, even though that there might be mistakes, that they assume the best. That no matter what, you know, what gets thrown at us during this case, we'll be able to solve it together. And we're a team together. And so there's so much more kind of emotional flexibility.
I love that.
And flexibility for mistakes.
Because the opposite of that is a client who doesn't trust, to a client who's filtering for, where's this lawyer going to stuff up? You know, where are the mistakes going to be made? How am I going to be left short? You know, and then that's where, you know, sometimes no matter what we do, the client's got something to complain about because they're filtering for that. Because as you say, they're probably not in a whole brain state, and they are not trusting, they don't feel safe, and they're feeling like something's going to go wrong any minute now. That's really powerful what you talk about in terms of managing client expectations and managing client relationships. Super powerful.
It was actually a study that was done on that, in terms of to predict which lawyers were more likely to be sued, or which doctors were more likely to be sued, and nurses, and these kind of industries where, you know, they're at far more risk of litigation. They actually found that it wasn't how knowledgeable they were, it was about how liked they were.
Oh, interesting.
So the less liked you are, the more likely you'll get sued. The more liked you are, the less likely you will get sued.
Wowzers. So AI in essence will make us more smart, I guess, and give us more information and, you know, a tool to become more experts, but it's not going to make us more likable.
No. And I think that's why, you know, it won't if you're lazy about it. We have to, I think you know, we have to be with the times, and we have to embrace change, because then we're competitive when we're giving our clients as much efficiency as what another law firm might give them. But it's not, then it doesn't mean that you just brush your hands of it and you get lazy. It's to that point is that it actually makes us step up as human beings and go, what is my point of difference, and what makes me so valuable as a human being? And it's in that deep, rich human connection. And so using AI is just a resource so that you are on point, you've done your research, you understand a bigger data set of information to be well informed, so that, you understand case law, and you understand litigation and law, and all of these different things that maybe, you know, it might have taken you weeks sometimes to even, and you might have been still learning on the go as you're going. You might be able to get a huge amount of that information really quickly. But that means then that gives you more time to really lean into your client and make a very, very refined individual case for that client.
Yeah. Do you see, and we've gone right off script, Tani, but that's okay. We're having,
what was that, sorry?
I said we've gone right off script, but we're just having a free flowing conversation, which is really cool. Do you see I suppose the relevance of lawyers moving forward being less about the technical knowledge and more about the human connection, or do you not see that changing, or is it going to be a balanced approach with AI?
I think it's still very much a balanced approach. You need to be a subject matter expert. That will very much still be the case, because it's just more that AI can help you be a subject matter expert faster, or to help you increase your awareness about some things that might have been in your blind spot. So like just before, in order for us to be well informed, we might have read an encyclopedia, or, done a Google search or talked to a colleague. It's that you can then get that information faster and richer, and with more individual nuance, because you can ask it questions in quite an intelligent way. But you still need to be educated. It's exactly the same thing as being a psychologist. I can't just rely on AI to spit out what are trauma-informed principles, and then I go, sweet, I've got a list of trauma-informed principles now. I'm ready to kind of unpack some of the deepest trauma with someone because I can list something. It really, all that did was, it was another tool in my tool bag that gave me a competitive edge to make sure that there wasn't something in my blind spot, that I'm up to date with evidence-based best practice. But it then still takes me to do the practice.
Yeah.
So to do the practice, I then have to utilize that at the right time, in the right place, with the right skill set, to be able to bring that evidence-based best practice to life.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Look, I've met a lot of lawyers who have that trepidation about AI because they think that it might, not replace them as such, but it might take away some of their relevance in terms of their expertise or their skills or their knowledge. And so if AI can do it, then, how am I going to differentiate myself as a good lawyer? And I think you're right in terms of, yes, there'll still be that, emphasis on being skilled. That's why people pay lawyers to do what they do, because they know the law, they know how to apply it, they've got all these skills. But I think there, in my view, there may be more of an emphasis on the human connection, on the human skills, to continue to build that trust in that connection with clients, because there'll be more and more AI available to do more of the legal skill part. Work out things that we used to have to use our brains for. But it can't build connection with people, and that still is going to be down to the lawyer. So yes, we have to be technically skilled, but I think lawyers that are going to excel in the future are going to be both technically skilled and very skilled in human connection. And the really good news about that is that there's a lot of lawyers out on the marketplace. There's lots of law firms opening up. I think we've got more lawyers than ever now, so the competition is quite high. And lots of lawyers that I coach and law firms will say, what's our differentiation? What makes us different? And that question kind of gets me in a bit of a spin, because I mean, how different can people be? We're so different that we're all the same now, in terms of our differentiation. And I always say to people, what makes you different is you. No one else is you. No one else can be you. And so you are the only model of you. And so when you build the connection with the person, with the client, with the organization you're working with, or whoever it might be, that connection is so unique. It can never be replicated by any other lawyer. They'll do it their way, but they can't ever do it your way, because they're not you. And so in that way, we all have a differentiation. In fact, we all are different without having to try. But we do need to work on those skills that will help us form those connections. So on that, empathy is something that as lawyers we talk about, we get wrong, we sometimes don't understand altogether. I know that when I was a lawyer, I thought empathy was about feeling my client's pain, because then that would make me understand what it's like and would make me fight harder for them. All that did was, I was getting divorced every day. I was losing my children every day. I was going through court proceedings every day, and it was exhausting, and it really led me down the path of burnout pretty quick smart.
Yeah.
So I learned, well, that can't be empathy. And if it is, then I can't have it, because I won't be able to survive that way. Can you give us kind of an overview? What is empathy, and how, as lawyers, can we build that skill without burning out?
I think that's a really good point that you say, if you're if you're in a workplace where you're really constantly being exposed to distressing information or highly emotive information, you can have moral injury, you can have vicarious trauma, you can have burnout. There's a lot of big things that can happen there. I think you listed some perfect ones. Same thing with, being in critical incident response, the same thing can happen. If you end up immersing yourself and blurring the boundaries between you and who you are, and where your point of purpose is in that relationship, versus you kind of almost blurring that boundary into being that person and immersing yourself in that, almost like being in character. Think about, like, being an actor and being in character. You can immerse yourself and you can literally lose your mind. And it's not healthy. It doesn't create a good boundary, but it also means that you then don't have the energy to be able to give them what you're required to do. You're not doing your job either. So I think that's a really, really good point. What you're trying to do is not put yourself in their shoes, because when you put yourself in their shoes, you blur that boundary. It's about imagining of what it must be like for them in their shoes.
Nice difference.
That becomes a really fundamentally point of difference, and understanding the privilege of being who you are in that relationship that you have. I guess this is where burnout can kind of help protect you as well. That for me personally, in my job, I actually find that it is far more distressing to be an innocent bystander of a critical incident. If you suddenly, you're in a cafe and then you suddenly see, a child get knocked out by a motorbike and both die on the road there, that is horrific. For you to just be an innocent bystander and to feel helpless and horrified and to be exposed to some really gruesome imagery, that is very distressing and can actually cause more of that kind of vicarious trauma and moral injury. But if I'm clear on understanding what it must be like for them to go through what they're going through, whether they might be gasping for air or they need some help, and I have a clear role where I can give purpose and meaning and a sense of safety, if I can meet that person where they're at, and in that moment, instead of that dialogue being my whole world fell apart and I felt so alone and scared, instead of me meeting them in that moment and holding their hand and saying, you're going to be okay and I'll be here with you for every step of the way, I have fundamentally changed their dialogue and I have purpose and meaning, and I can give that person's life purpose and meaning again. And it's the same with a lawyer. It is so scary to go through something, and the law is so huge and feels so intimidating. To be a lawyer is such an incredibly privileged role, to be able to meet someone where they're at in that time when they feel like their whole world is going to fall apart and they are absolutely riddled and paralyzed with fear of the unknown, to be able to hold them in that space and say, I'm here for you. I know the law and we will get through this together, is such an incredible thing. And it doesn't mean that you're going to promise that you can paint a picture of exactly what that's going to look like, but more that they're not going to face that alone. That's the biggest thing, is that they won't face that alone, that they've got someone by their side to go through that process. It's a pretty powerful thing for another human to be able to do.
So powerful. And I have to say, I mean, the emotional boundary, I talk about emotional boundaries, and that's that kind of, rather than stepping into their shoes, almost, from a dissociated place, kind of watching what's going on and imagining what it's like. That's where I think a lot of lawyers get that balance really wrong. And it's about, it's stepping into someone's shoes and really feeling their pain. Not that we don't, intend to do that, but that's kind of what happens when we are immersed in a case, and maybe there's a bit too much stress, maybe there's a lot on our plate, maybe we've popped our top and we're not kind of thinking logically and rationally. Our natural instinct is to kind of just go with the emotion of a case. And so I think having those really strong emotional boundaries, and stepping outside of the picture, lending a hand without being kind of, it's almost like, I know, help me kind of draw an analogy. It's almost like watching a movie and just appreciating the characters for who they are, what they do, the story, and just kind of imagining what it's like to be them, as opposed to acting in the movie with them and becoming the character. So many times I think we become the character. And I used to hear that a lot in correspondence back and forth between lawyers about, we rather than my client.
That's a really
we
good point.
believe that kind of thing.
And I guess to that point as well, there's kind of a saying in terms of, life is about creating yourself, not finding yourself, and that, you will either be the star in your own movie, or you will, without self-awareness, you'll just become an extra in somebody else's. And so you can either become the extra in their movie because they're so emotionally overwhelmed and you're kind of just ricocheting off their emotions, or you're in control. And that's what you're meant to do. You're supposed to create, as a lawyer or a subject matter expert, you're meant to create the control, the structure, the sense of safety, the sense of security for that person. And that means you having good boundaries and setting up from the very start what those boundaries are going to look like. If they have got that sense of structure, that you're also sharing with them how you're going to work with them and what that's going to look like. And that builds integrity, that you did what you say and you say what you do. But if you don't take that opportunity to actually define the boundaries from the start, then they don't know what it's going to look like. So you've actually kind of missed out on an opportunity whilst also creating psychological safety for yourself and them as well. Now that boundary, kind of creating that mental contract with them around when they can call you, why they can call you, what that's going to look like, how you can respond, how quickly you can respond is also very respectful and, creates that psychological safety.
Yeah. It's almost kind of like another webinar in itself, isn't it?
Yes,
How do we build those? There's so much to this. I think what we'll do is I'll ask you this question kind of to wrap us up and maybe give us some final insights and thoughts. But, for anyone watching going, this is all great, but how do I do that? How do I build those skills so that I can stay relevant and effective in an AI enhanced world? How do I build active listening skills, empathy skills, connection, so that I stand out as a lawyer and not just become another, AI user?
Yep.
What would you say? How can we build those skills?
Yeah, I mean, the wonderful thing is emotional intelligence and this kind of stuff. It's not something that anyone is just born with. We build it, we create it and we develop it. So it's kind of like a muscle. And the nice thing is around how the brain is that there's huge neuroplasticity. So almost like you have arm day and you have leg day and you build kind of muscles, your brain is exactly the same. You can literally change who you are. And you see that even with major brain injury victims that had a major car accident or something like that, and they're in the neuro ward, you can literally build and change your brain. And you even see there's a book, The Woman Who Changed Her Brain, and she was born with an intellectual disability. And essentially it's just repetition and structure. So when you kind of understand the skills that you need and you do that over and over again, all of you, everyone will be able to create and achieve emotional intelligence. It's not, it's something that you practice like a muscle. The interesting thing is, and this is kind of where human beings can be kind of a little bit lazy, and AI is going to really shine the light on the exceptional lawyers, the ones that are really taking that time to have that human connection, because AI will be able to replace a lot of the kind of facts and spitting out. I would say the first thing to start on is to build on your self-awareness. That's where you're really going to make a difference. There was a researcher, Tasha Enrich. She did a huge research. She looked at over 800 research papers on self-awareness. What she found was that the general population thinks, this is the general population, 95% of the population think they have good self-awareness. And so we're all kind of, thinking, I've got good self-awareness, I'm fine, like it's not me. But then when they actually started to really look in and interview people and find what is the population's level of self-awareness, only about 10% to 15% of the population has good self-awareness. And so I guess kind of on a good day, over 80% of us are lying to ourselves about having good self-awareness. And so it's kind of like it's taking the time to look within and really getting to know you. It's like your own personal and professional development. So your own personal development is actually going to achieve your professional development. Absolutely. It will make you stand out and be exceptional as a lawyer. So when you start to build on your self-awareness, you kind of take all that stuff out of your blind spots. What is your communication style? So doing some courses, understanding, is your communication style actually activating cortisol, or is it activating oxytocin? You might not even know that. The research shows that 9 out of 10 conversations miss the mark. That's insane. In general, the amount of noise and conversations we create in this world, 9 out of 10 conversations miss the mark. So where are you going wrong as an individual, and taking some accountability and creating some insight about that? Are you convinced about, are you so convinced about, showing your point of view to your client without actually truly listening? Are you sometimes so busy up in your head thinking about what you're going to say that you're not actually being present and listening to that person? Are you distracted by your own emotions? Are you kind of always going in because you've seen so much of the world that you're so cynical and so critical that you're not even being emotionally present in that moment? There's a whole bunch of stuff that you can do there by actually increasing your self-awareness. Doing some values, like take it some time to actually look at, what do you value? What are the things that are truly important to you in your life? Practice in line with your values to have that ethical reasoning that AI is probably not going to have. what is right, what is wrong? You know, how do you kind of communicate with someone? What is ethically right, to be able to help build that trust and reflection. You know, you can, so I guess I'd say, yeah, looking at your resilience levels, understanding how to self-regulate, to calm yourself, to be in a whole brain state before you even connect with your clients, understanding boundaries about, yeah, are you taking on too many cases? So you, as you said, you're coming in hot. What are your, what is your conversation style? What are your values? What are the things that are really important to you? When you're in a good mental place, when you lead yourself well as a lawyer or anyone in this world, when we lead ourselves well, we show up better for anybody else and we can lead
So
them
true.
better. But so I would say that would be one of the biggest things you can win in your own personal life. I would really invest in your self-awareness so that you can build on emotional intelligence, so you can take yourself through the next era of AI and have that competitive edge.
So true. And the really good news about that is self-awareness is something that you can actually build. Like I can honestly say, I don't know if I'll say I'm one of the 10%, but I can honestly say that my level of self-awareness today is far, far better than what it used to be, say, 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. So,
Yeah.
and I, you know, there's this level of catching myself in the moment and feeling what I'm feeling and going, oh, okay, I'm feeling this. Whereas, you know, years ago, I would just feel it and I would just go with it. And I wouldn't even stop to ask myself, what's going on? What am I feeling? Where did it come from? How can I change it? There was none of that. It was just like, boom, go, like, you know, just in that reptilian part of the brain, which is, you know, so, and that's definitely something that, I mean, I myself help a lot of people do build that level of self-awareness, and the more aware we are, the easier it becomes to do two things: change what doesn't work for us and learn new skills to do things differently. And as you say, you know, change the brain, rewire the programs that run our day to day. This has been like so much fun. Honestly, we could just keep going. I wouldn't show one
I'm very
slide.
passionate.
We've got all these slides to show people, but we didn't. But that's okay.
Yeah.
We'll send them out to you.
Yeah.
Most of what Tani spoke about, beautifully illustrated in some slides, so you'll have those if you want them. Any kind of final comments from you, Tani, about AI, stakeholder engagement, relationship building? What
I
can
think
we expect?
the only thing was just to kind of reinforce and reflect on something that you said before about, you know, no one else is you, is kind of looking at like, you are a brand. Every single individual in this world is a brand.
Yeah.
Every single person on this webinar who will read this, and like everyone in the world, you are a brand. And often we kind of look at it about, you know, we think about investing ourselves as being selfish. But the reality is that if everyone took the time to look after this, the world would actually be a better place.
Yeah.
You know, when we see the worst things, the miscommunication, the tragic incidents that happen in this world, all it comes down to was this person wasn't in the right state of mind.
Wow.
And, you know, so there's this kind of, you know, that saying of like, yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I'm wise, so I'm going to change myself. And so if we all invest in ourselves and try to be the best version of ourselves, we are then in a position to actually help our clients be the best version of themselves too.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what AI is forcing us to do, is like just become really human, really to stand out. It's what is our point of difference, and to create those richer, deeper conversations, richer, deeper interactions, and get better results and outcomes. Yeah.
Oh my God, what a delicious conversation. Thank you so much, Tani. That was so cool. If there's any questions, we've got a couple of minutes. If you've got any questions, if you want to pick Tani's brain, this is your opportunity to do that. Otherwise, you can reach out to me or to Tani. Tani, where can people find you?
So I'd say the best way, either LinkedIn, you can look me up on LinkedIn, Tani Clark, and yeah, send me a message. Otherwise, you can email me on Tani, it's TAHNEE, it's quite unusual, at Alfie, ALFI, health.com, alfiehealth.com.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah,
and if you can't find Tani, find me and I'll put you in touch with Tani. Thank you so much.
Well,
There's
thanks for the
some
messages.
comments in there. Yeah, some great
Yeah.
messages. Yeah, I absolutely loved that. That was so cool. Thank you for joining us. This was a really good conversation for our April webinar. Join us for our May webinar that will be coming up at the end of the month, and we're going to be talking about how to bring out the best in ourselves. And I'll have another guest speaker with us for that one. So make sure you watch out for emails and LinkedIn posts about the next one coming up. Thanks again, Tani, and I
Thank
hope to
you.
see you again soon.
Yeah,
Bye
it
for
was so
now.
wonderful. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.